Ryan and I are going to get into this a little bit later in the show, but Ryan is openly on the left, I'm openly on the right, and you went on ABC this week and talked to Terry Moran and had a really interesting exchange with Terry, who pushed you on the question of prosecuting women, prosecuting mothers who, in a post-Roe world, have an abortion and state laws create a problem for them, and treat them as, murderers, basically, prosecute them as though they were involved in a murder. And it was interesting to watch because Terry Moran seemed to have a very clear sort of perspective that he was happy to air. And I actually think the question, though, is fair, of how if you sincerely believe this is proven by science to be a life and thus it is a taking of a life, defending that as you did on air, I think is really important, and I know it's difficult. So I guess I just wanted to ask you about it. As this week unfolded, you guys were everywhere at SBA list, much to the chagrin of some people on the left who don't even think you should be interviewed. How have you interpreted the media reaction this week? And what do you think the danger is of some of those networks just not talking to pro-life people anymore and just hosting one side of the debate?
Yeah, it's very interesting. It seems to me over the last week that the Washington Post and the New York Times in particular, every single reporter is now on the abortion beat. I've talked to more people that individual reporters. They seem to be all writing the same story. I've never talked to them before. I'm hoping that these stories come out well. I'm glad that they're asking for a pro-life perspective. But when it comes to the major TV networks, I'm not sure who else from the pro-life side was on CNN or ABC. It's hard to view all of the coverage while you're also trying in this moment to respond. But I do think that on the ABC interview that Mr. Moran's bias was really on display, and that anyone could see that. I think journalists are called to be objective and to be as calm as possible when discussing these issues, and he completely betrayed that. I think he was frustrated that I had corrected him a few times earlier in the interview on the reality of abortion in America, the fact that there are late-term abortions happening well past the point that a child is viable, especially here in Washington, D.C., for example, and the fact that the Democratic Party position has not been safe, legal, and rare for a long time now. So I think people need to hear both sides. It's been interesting watching the reaction to the ABC interview, and later this week I had been on CNN to see the comments and some on Twitter, which is not necessarily real life. But I do think that there's the role of the media is so important in how this leak is covered and how the eventual decision is covered, because there's really two narratives that you can sort of see emerging. The first is that abortion is going to be illegal overnight if this ends up being the final opinion, which is simply not true. And the second is the reality, which is this returns the right of the people to make policy decisions through their elected representatives, and those policy decisions can change based on consensus ebbing and flowing, and on political engagement from the voters. If you don't like a law that someone passes, you can work to unelect them. So, and really this focus on the tools of democracy rather than just a blanket fear-mongering position that this ends abortion overnight, which just simply isn't the case, and that's the media's responsibility, is to report this accurately.